I'm joined by Douglas East MHK, Chris Robertshaw, and a busy day for you in the House of Keys. Obviously, massive interest in the news where we're up to with this steam packet report. You were ready to start gunning for things. I know it seemed you were looking for an apology, and there was an apology of sorts, wasn't there, from the Chief Minister?
Yeah, there was an apology today, which was very important. I mean, my question to him was that there was a necessity for judgment and statesman-like behaviour to cool the whole thing down, and to give Howard his due, he did apologise. I do think, though, that apology should also translate into a letter to the Alderman Steam Packet Company in a formal form of apology, because there was definitely a need for one.
You've seen that 94-page report. You've gone through it, with, no doubt, very carefully. I've looked at it, and it's been passed to others, other broadcasters in the UK and their sort of legal people, and they just don't make much of it at all. They think it's a fudge. I mean, it's not really putting the blame anywhere. It's skirting around the issue, do you think?
Well, what it does skirt about very clearly is the necessity for political leadership and judgment. It appears to want to, as it were, boil everything down to bureaucratic process and procedure and try to find fault in that, when in the end the whole matter related to the steam packet was a matter of leadership and judgment. If I can just try and explain that. If you trace back through both David Ashford's and the Chief Minister's comments through the innumerable press conferences that we've had, you personally you will recall a number of times that both of them said, oh, well, we must follow medical and clinical advice. You've heard them say that many times.
Many times.
Okay. So the issue here was about making sure that the virus didn't get in through the steam packet crews, okay? So what actually happened was that the leadership in the steam packet in December raised two very clear attempts. They, as lay people, recognised that there was a growing risk issue related to the Kent variant, which is, we all now know, is more transmissible. The steam packet management and board recognised that in December and did two things. They wrote to government on the 4th of December and said, look, we are now really concerned about the increasing likelihood of transmissibility of the Kent variant, and as such it's very important that we vaccinate the crew to significantly reduce the transmissibility. And they also raised the issue of wanting to see testing going on for the crew coming off duty. On both occasions, the clear, distinct answer from the medical side was no. Public health side was no, we're not going to do that. And the political leadership was clear that they had two messages, one clear message from the steam packet and another from public health, and they just simply followed public health, which said no, you shouldn't test and you shouldn't vaccinate the crew. Now, there was a point of leadership there and political judgment required by the politicians, because they already had clear advice from the steam packet that there was a need. Now, they simply did what they carried on doing pretty well through, which was follow medical advice and apply UK medical advice, and did not apply any judgment of their own. When it all goes wrong later on, they then try to turn around and blame the steam packet. I just don't get how they could do that, but that's what they tried to do.
Okay, so if you go through this, you can definitely see there is indications that Dr Hewitt is the one that's in the frame. I would take it you understand that's why you see it as well. If anyone's in the frame, if anyone's going to go take the rap for this, Dr Hewitt will be the one, do you think?
It's not for me to name individuals. My concern as a politician is the behaviour of other politicians, and what I'm saying to you today is that there was a judgment call required on their part, and my view, and you know that I started picking this up myself as early as I possibly could, saying, for goodness sake,
vaccinate the steam packet. I remember you literally used those words, I think.
Vaccinate, for goodness sake, vaccinate the steam packet crew, because otherwise we're at risk. Yeah. This did not need the, medical direction. It needed a political judgment, and that was what was lacking.
Somebody has to take the rap, do they not? I mean, is it one of these things that, I mean, otherwise this will just disappear, won't it? And no one's to blame.
Okay,
don't worry about it. We've made mistakes, but we're over it.
Is your suggestion that somehow politicians shouldn't accept responsibility and find blame in officers? Because if that's the case, let me ask you this question. If that is the case, what is the point of politics? Why are we elected? We are elected to apply an element of political judgment, and therefore politicians carry the can as much as should the officers.
Okay, well, it's an ongoing thing anyway, because let's face it, PAC, which you're very much involved in, and boy, have you been asking some big questions. I mean, should we just quickly, by the way, the rebuttal, were you happy with that response today from Mr. Ashford, that he's done everything he wants to do on that? He's given, I get name checked because he's talked to me, he's talked to other people, enough's enough, move on.
Well, let me answer that question in a slightly different way, in the sense that when, and this should be to people a matter of concern, when the steam packet transmission occurred, government wanted very quickly to lash out and blame the steam packet. We now know that was a mistake. When Dr. Rachel Glover raised issues and said, no, that's not correct and that's not correct, there was a tendency, as it were, to try to denigrate her, if you'll recall. Later on, it turned into, well, you know, you're going to get this detailed rebuttal. We never got that detailed rebuttal. We ended up with smoke and mirrors. Well, we've answered this bit, it's that bit over there's answered, I'm not going to go any further. And then the third area of concern must be around the Abbotswood issue, because, and this is obviously, for those personally involved, an incredibly hurtful thing. But when things went wrong at Abbotswood, you will recall that we heard words like criminal charges and sub judice, and that hung in the air for a whole year.
Still there.
And now we're told there are no criminal.
I think it's still showing something, isn't it?
No, the
police are involved.
That's the point. You think there is.
And I've asked the health minister.
We've been told that there are no criminal charges. Oh, but there's going to be health and safety issues. In other words, look, it can't be this, but it's going to be that. Now, what I'm trying to say to you, perhaps clumsily, is we need not to have a government that as soon as things go wrong where they could possibly be in the frame, that they immediately lash out and find others who are responsible. There's 3 occasions now that I've just detailed, which show that the government is mishandling initial reactions. Let's go find somebody to blame, or let's diminish somebody. Now, is this brand new to COVID, or is this something about an underlying trend that government has got, that it's never their fault and they're never wrong, and, well, up till today, we never apologise?
We surprised the apology. I mean, and it wasn't a very full and frank one, was it?
Well, it was an apology.
It was an apology.
And then there was a but. Well, it's both our faults. Well, I'm at a loss to know how it was the steam packet's fault. Let's look at 2 issues. There was a strong indication that there should have been isolation. Do you remember that, on the part of the crews? But did that ever make any sense at all? Because if the crew member had gone home and isolated, did that mean, for goodness knows how long, does that mean the rest of the household needed to isolate? Did children who were supposed to go to school be denied that? That was never the case.
But this report should have brought all this...
Precisely. So there's some more to talk about in this thing. But how could isolation possibly have worked at all? And yet they were banging the drum about this. The isolation must be carried out. Well, it was never going to work unless the whole household isolated, and to expect anybody to do that week in, week out, month in, month out was just nonsense. And yet they were hanging their hat on that one. Then there's the other issue. Again, this appeared in the report, this issue about PPE, Oh, well, that must be dealt with properly. But hang on a second here. PPE worked well when Kent variant, where
I changed it.
Yeah, absolutely, because the Kent variant transmogrified into being an aerosol transmission. Yeah. Now, in closed, confined areas inside the ferry, where staff were working cheek by jowl effectively, and by definition had to, how was PPE any good when you had aerosol transmission? And the answer is it wasn't. So the whole thing there was of no real concern. It majored in the report, and yet I can't remember reading in my examination of the report that we've had about vaccination at all. I mean, it just
the word vaccination wasn't there, was it?
It just didn't appear.
Was it not there at all?
The biggest thing, the whole issue, hangs on whether we vaccinate everybody, and yet the whole issue of vaccination with regard to the steam packet didn't get an appearance at all. There were attempts in the report to, as it were, deflect towards the shipping register, which has left us bemused. I mean, why won't our leadership accept responsibility and apologise and do the statesmanlike thing in such circumstances that we can then say, well, okay, fine, nobody gets everything right, let's move on. But it's worrying.
So let me just take you back. I said it looked like, Dr. Hewitt, maybe you kind of indicated that actually that's an officer and it should stop with a politician. Is that what you were actually saying? A politician should take responsibility for this?
Yes,
and therefore resign that far, or at least be chastised gently? I don't know how far you'd go. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think a politician in office should be able to apologise without necessarily being sacked.
Yeah.
I mean,
so who would it be?
It's the judgment of if the letter of apology is received by the steam packet and it's issued by the Chief Minister who's coming to the end of his term of office, then I think we can call it a day, can't we?
Well, we'll see. Now, there's loads more on this, but before you go, we're recording this on Tuesday night. Just to remind everyone, PAC sitting tomorrow, you have another person to interview. Can you just enlighten everyone who you're talking to tomorrow?
Yeah, Rosalind Ranson, Dr Rosalind Ranson, who has been and is the medical director for the Isle of Man, DHSC, and we called her in for a public evidence session. However, you already know, I think, because
there's been a news release only this afternoon.
It's reverted to private session.
Is that unusual? Is that acceptable? Will that ever make it into public domain, or is there something amazing that's going to come out tomorrow?
If it's a private session, nothing will come out. But the point is that these issues that we're dealing with are so big and so important that even if it doesn't come issues that aren't aired in the public space immediately, at least it will be in the mind and concern of the parliamentary process for future analysis.
Who's put it into private? Is it some legal issue? I know you can't therefore talk about it. Is it that sort of thing? It's a legality.
There's a legal element to it. Yes, right. It's not directly of our choice. However, a sensible judgment suggests that the right course of action is to go into private session.
And would it be that pressure has been put upon PAC to do this? I mean, who makes the decision to put it into private?
This isn't a matter of pressure on the PAC. The PAC hasn't succumbed to pressure. It's circumstances which the PAC has adjudged as being right.
So the Attorney General's advised you on this?
The Attorney General will be involved, yes.
And this lady, we saw a lot of her at the beginning of the whole thing. She came to press conferences and then we never saw anything more about her, but she seems to know what she's talking about. I mean, hence you've asked her to this thing. Is there something dynamite-y that we should be expecting from this that is trying to be suppressed?
Well, because it's in private, I'm not going to sort of prejudge it. All I can say is that Rosalind Ranson is held in high regard. She's a highly competent lady, and it's appropriate that the PAC listen to her in private session.
And just to finish, is there a chance, once it's all done, some of that will make it into your final report and be attributed? Otherwise, does she not appear in the reports?
I'm not able to say that, but all I'm saying here is that I hope that what the PAC learns across its full investigation assists the next House in a whole range of areas.
Is this a gagging thing, in other words? Let me try that word.
No, it's not.
Is someone gagging this evidence?
No, it's not a question of gagging. It's a very delicate and sensitive area that must be handled properly.